This is Lee from the Law School Toolbox. Today, we're tackling a topic that's on every law student's mind: how to figure out what's going to be on your final exams. I know, it feels like you just started the semester, but trust me, those finals will sneak up on you faster than you can say objection. Let's face it, law school can be a whirlwind. The days might drag, but the semester flies by in a blink. Before you know it, you're staring down finals week, wondering how on earth you're going to memorize everything from torts, contracts, and civil procedure all at once. A few weeks or even a couple of months just isn't enough time to master all that information. But don't panic. That's where strategy comes in. Now, we've all heard professors say, anything in the syllabus can be tested on the final exam. And sure, technically that's true. But here's a little secret. Professors can be pretty predictable. The testable material isn't usually as broad as anything on the syllabus. So let's talk about how to read between the lines and figure out what's likely to show up on your exam. First things first, try to get your hands on some old exams from your professor. This is like getting a sneak peek behind the curtain. When you're looking at these old exams, pay attention to what topics come up the most. For example, you might notice in a torts class, the majority of questions deal with negligence. That's a big clue that you should focus more on negligence than other topics when you're preparing for finals. On the flip side, you might see that your contracts professor has only tested anticipatory repudiation once in their 30 years of teaching. Does that mean you can ignore it completely? No. But it does suggest it's less likely to be a major focus on your exam. Looking at old exams also gives you insight into the types of questions your professor likes to ask. Do they love long, issue-spotting hypotheticals? Or are they more into multiple choice questions? Maybe they throw in some policy questions or ask you to compare different laws or cases. Knowing this can help you tailor your study strategy. Now, what if your professor doesn't provide old exams? Don't worry. You're not out of luck. Talk to students who've taken the class before. They can give you the inside scoop on what types of questions showed up and what topics were heavily tested. Here's another pro tip. Look at exams from all the classes your professor teaches, not just the one you're in. If they teach criminal law, criminal procedure, and evidence, try to get info on all of those exams. Professors often have a go-to style that they use across different classes. All right, let's move on to what happens in the classroom. Pay close attention to what your professor emphasizes during lectures. And I mean what they emphasize, not what's emphasized in your casebook. Why? Because professors will cover what they find the most important in class. If they don't think it's important enough to cover in lecture, they probably won't think it's important enough to test. Think about which topics get the most airtime. In torts, for instance, negligence probably takes up a big chunk of your semester. That's a pretty good sign it's going to show up on your exam in a big way. Compare that to a concept like abnormally dangerous activities, which might only get a class or two. Your professor is giving you clues about what they think is most important. However, oftentimes those torts professors still like to add in an abnormally dangerous activities question. But it's not just about the time spent on topics. Watch for verbal and physical cues from your professor too. Do they get really animated when discussing certain topics? Do they have more expertise in one area than others? If your professor ever says, "This is important," or "Remember this for the exam," you better believe that's going to show up on test day. Star it in your notes, bold it in your outline, tattoo it on your forehead if you have to. Okay, maybe not that last one. Now let's talk about your professors themselves. Their own interests often play a huge role in what they decide to test. Think about it. If you had to read 60 or more exams in a couple of weeks, wouldn't you rather read about topics you're passionate about? Do a little detective work. Most professors have their CV online. Check out their professional experience before they became a professor in any published works they have. If your torts professor specialized in medical malpractice before teaching, you might want to pay extra attention to informed consent issues. If your trusts and estates professor has written a ton about wills but nothing about trusts, well, you can probably guess which way the exam is likely to lean. All right, now let's talk about how to organize all this information. One cool trick is to create what we call a heat map. It's especially helpful if you're a visual learner. Think of it like those weather maps you see on the news, but instead of showing temperatures, it shows how likely topics are to be tested. Here's how it works. Start by making 4 categories. You can use any colors you want, but let's stick with the weather theme. Red is for topics that are almost certain to appear. These are the ones that show up in lots of past exams, get tons of class time, and align with your professor's interests. Orange is for topics likely to appear. Maybe they were on a few past exams and got significant class time. Yellow is for topics that could possibly appear. They were mentioned in class, but not discussed heavily. And green is for topics less likely to appear, like ones that were in the readings but barely discussed in class. Then take your outline or make a separate document and highlight each topic with its corresponding color. When you're done, you'll have a very colorful document that shows at a glance what you should focus on the most. Now, I've got to keep it real with you. There's no guarantee that these tips will predict your exam with 100% accuracy. Professors can be unpredictable sometimes. They have free will and could decide to test something they've never tested before. But using these strategies will help you focus on what's most likely to come up. Remember, the goal here is to study smarter, not necessarily harder. By focusing on the topics and question types that are most likely to appear, you'll walk into that exam room feeling prepared and confident. But don't completely ignore the topics that seem less likely to be tested. To truly succeed, you should still take a comprehensive approach to studying. Just spend more time on those red and orange topics. So there you have it, folks, your guide to becoming an exam predicting ninja. Remember, these techniques aren't foolproof, but they can definitely help you prioritize your study time and focus your energy where it's most likely to pay off. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And hey, drop a comment below with your own exam prediction tips. We're all in this together, and I'd love to hear what strategies work for you.